For those who don't know, Renata is the founder of 5 Hour, and she has over 20 years of experience in change management. So she's worked with companies like Air New Zealand, Fletcher's Construction, University of Auckland, Vodafone, Spark, so companies like that, organizations like that. And she's been able to work with them to help achieve success through positive transformation. So through her research and hundreds of deep dive interviews, she has discovered that many of these organizations had something in common when it came to failure or problems. And that common failure was due to a lack of the ability to listen. So they lacked the ability to listen. No one knew how to listen effectively. And it wasn't just that, many of them had no way or effective way to develop their listening skills, right? And so this caused a negative ripple effect on businesses and relationships. So coupled with her passion and dedication to help people grow, Lee was inspired to develop the 5 levels of listening. It's a methodology that she uses in her businesses to help other organizations and individuals to improve their ability to listen. And so I've invited Renata to join us tonight because I believe that great leaders are great listeners. And she's developed this methodology that's helped many people, the 5 levels of listening. And so I would love for her to be able to share with us what the 5 levels of listening is, give us some insights and tips on how leaders can develop their listening skills. So with that being said, it is my privilege to be able to hand the time now over to Lee to take us through a presentation and some Q&A at the end of it as well.
Okay, so thank you for having me as part of your leadership class and for inviting me. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a farmer's daughter, brought up in a place where if you didn't know where you were, there's no sign to tell you where you were. You just have to know. And I've been married nearly 38 years. I have 5 children and 18 grandchildren. So we are a busy, big family. 3 of our grandchildren were born during lockdown. So it's been exciting times. I'm a school dropout, and at 15 years of age, I lived on my own, renting a place and paying my way in the world. My parents had taught me about the value of hard work, so I applied that principle to my job. And over the years, I realised that I had a natural ability to lead. And for the past 25 years, I've worked as a change manager. So Percy has described what change managers do, and our job is to lead people through significant change when big organisations or any organisations are experiencing a quite significant change. I've also been a life coach for most of that time, and have worked with youth using change management methodologies to affect change in individuals and especially youth. So I have found through my years of working with people that the most common need people have is to feel that they have been listened to, that they have a voice and are heard. So have you ever felt that you weren't being listened to? Yeah, I think we've all had that feeling at times where we feel that we're not being listened to. Have you ever recognised when you're the one that's not been listening? Because we all do that as well. Talk to the hand, we do that. So if you think for a moment, were you ever taught how to listen, or were you just told to listen? Were you ever taught to listen or told to listen? Right. So I know that most of us were never taught how to listen. So I know from the many experiences I've had with I know from the many experiences I have had that one of the most important attributes a person can have is the ability to listen. So I want to tell you about this guy. He's Bernard Baruch. He was one of the most successful people. He said most of the successful people I've known are the ones who do more listening than talking. Now, he was an American financier, a stock investor, a statesman, a political consultant. And he was born in 1870 to a Jewish family, and he amassed a fortune after buying a seat on the New York Stock Exchange, where he traded in the sugar market, which was booming at that time. He went on to advise the US president on matters in World War II, and then he again advised the president in matters leading up to World War I and World War II. He knew the importance of listening. His friend, Winston Churchill, also believed in the power of listening. Winston Churchill said, "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen." So these two were great leaders, and they lived in the most difficult of times, but they both advocated the importance of listening. Now, listening applies to all situations and to all people, especially in the most difficult of times. So have you ever thought how much listening you do when you're angry?
No. Not much.
Not much. When things are not going as you expect, or when things are like they shouldn't be, or you're doing things you shouldn't be, listening tends to go out the window, especially when we're angry. Now, these two men, and this is why I wanted to show you this guy, is these two men advocated in the most difficult of times that it was still really important to listen. So it just shows you there how important it is. How many of you see this scene being played out in your own home, workplace, or even out in the community? Before lockdown, I went to the airport and I was early for my flight, and we went and got something to eat. And I looked around at the tables around me, and this was the scene. There were 3 tables with people all on devices. And they probably thought they were having a good time together. So listening is a skill we're in danger of losing in a world of digital distractions and information overload. Good listening requires focus and concentration, which is difficult because more and more things compete for our attention. I'm sure a lot of you may know Stephen Covey. He wrote some pretty famous books on leadership. He said education and socialization has placed an emphasis on teaching us how to communicate, e.g. read, write, and speak, but doesn't prepare us to really listen to what others are saying. So it comes back to that question I asked at the beginning, were we ever taught to listen, or were we told to listen? And I know for myself, I was definitely told, but this is what he says about that we actually never had the emphasis in our education to teach us how to listen better. Sorry, 70% of our time is spent communicating, and out of that 70%, 45% is spent listening. When researchers estimate that we only remember 25 to 50% of what we hear. So if we have not learned how to listen, then what researchers estimate is probably right, if not underestimated. So 45% of our communication time is taken up with listening versus 9% in writing, 16% reading, and 30% speaking. And so you'll be amazed at how much time of our communication is actually in listening. Businesses and academics listed listening as one of the most important skills for an effective professional. Yet only 1.5% of articles in business journals dealt with learning effectiveness. So it is not something that's really taken seriously, yet it is listed as one of the most important things that a leader needs to have. So I'm going to take you through the 5 levels of listening. So we're going to start off with level 1, remembering we're trying to transform ourselves into being better listeners. So level 1 is somebody that doesn't listen. So you may have not listened to somebody, what somebody's been saying to you, either from being preoccupied, not interested, or felt that what was being said wasn't important. But in contrast, you're most likely on reflection that you've had situations where you have felt that you have not been listened to. So level 1 is somebody that isn't listening at all, not listening. And level 2, the second level of listening, are those people who listen to what you're saying, but they don't hear a thing. The person you are talking to seems engaged and appears to be listening, but when you would expect she or he to respond in the conversation, they talk about something totally different or about themselves. And you thought, gee, I was sure they were listening to me. I was really sure of it. So again, in reflection, you might find that you were probably one of those at times yourself. Level 3 is someone who's willing to listen to what you have to say. And we all have people in our lives that are really good listeners, and we treasure them. They're the people that we can go to and talk about anything. They're really, really good listeners. Level 4 is this takes listening to another level. And it takes into account our voice tones and the use of our senses into what somebody is not saying. So you often find that opportunity when you just do a simple good morning to somebody. So saying good morning to somebody is easy, but how they respond back can tell you a whole world of things. So I'll give you an example of that. When many, many years ago, I used to start work early, so I'd come in and I'd go around the office and say hello to people, and then before I went into my office, I started my day. And one day I remember going around the office saying good morning, and one of my staff said to me, "Good morning, Lee. It was really hard to get to work today." And I went, "Oh, was it?" And I carried on walking. And I got into my office and I thought, oh, it's a strange thing that she said. It was hard to get to work today. Back then it wasn't that hard at 7:30 in the morning to get to work in Auckland. And so I waited till she was on her own, and I went back and I said to her, "Why was it hard to get to work today?" And she just put her head in her hands and said, "Look, Liam, I've had to take my mother in. She's an alcoholic. She found the alcohol in our house, and I woke up at 6:30. She was drunk on the ground, virtually unconscious. I've cleaned her up, put her in bed. I don't even know if she's alive or not." And I said, "Whoa, okay, well, first, one, you need to go home. And two, we probably need to give you flexible hours while you work through this season of time." And so we put a plan in place. But I went back to my office after that and I thought, that lady would have stayed at work that whole day. She was loyal, hardworking. She would have stayed at work worrying about her mum the whole day without saying anything. And all she said to me was, "It was hard to get to work today." So level 4 is about taking our listening to a whole new level and looking and listening with our senses and our tones and taking that whole thing in. So then you might be wondering, well, what the heck's level 5? And level 5 is listening with understanding. Now, conversations may not be a part of this. This level takes some time to master and means that we have to be really present in our environment as well as in our conversations. So a person does not need to tell you the whole story for us to understand what's going on. And their actions may speak louder than their words. And so, for example, in a meeting, there might be one person talking, but the reactions of the others give you that wider understanding of that whole conversation that's going on. But the other point of level 5 is, and it's above all, is our ability to listen to our instinct, our gut feel, our inner voice, whatever you refer to it. That is the most important. If we can identify, listen, and act on our instincts, we will achieve a level of understanding beyond any other level of listening. And that's the one that we want to aim for. So those are the 5 levels of listening. Briefly, that's the 5 levels of listening. So I want to go through a few tips to improve your listening that you can take away from this evening. And I want to do that, and then I'm going to sum up. So the first tip I want to give you is the art of pausing. So there's a great power that comes from pausing. Now, pausing, when we find ourselves being distracted, allows us a moment in time to recollaborate or refocus on the present. So this enables us to re-engage as needed. Now, I'm not saying that you say to somebody, "Oh, excuse me, can we just pause for a moment while I just get myself thoughts all in order?" It's not that at all. It's about taking a breath. The other person will never know. It is about just doing a mental shift. I know some people squeeze one of their fingers, so that they have a physical reminder that they've gone off and they get themselves re-collaborated back into the conversation. So these pauses may be a few seconds long and will probably go unnoticed by most people. And the whole action of pausing can apply to a number of aspects of life. So it's not just about for listening. So My first tip for you today is to practice the power of pausing. You will find your ability to stop thinking about what you want to say is replaced by genuine interest in what someone is trying to say to you. Now, I'll give you an example. This was a production manager, and he said, Lee, I didn't quite do the pausing technique right, but it had a huge impact on me. He said, I had a team leader come, sitting down, going through the close down of the plant and all the leave that was taken, the schedule, and he says, I had my laptop open, and then the notifications of my email kept popping up, and I kept glancing at them. And he says, suddenly I realized that I probably had lost 2 to 3 minutes of the conversation. He says, I gave myself such a fright that he leapt off his chair, and which gave the other guy fright. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. And he walked around to the guy and he said to him, could you please rewind 2 to 3 minutes and start again? And I need to be able to listen to you. Now, he said it wasn't the fact that he'd apologized and asked him to repeat. He said, but it was the look on the guy's face when he said, I looked into his face and I saw in those flash of a second his appreciation for me really, truly listening to him. But he said it was the look of, this guy is interested in what I have to say, and what I have to say is important. And he says, the look on the guy's face, he said, I'll never forget. And he says, I have really, really tried hard to apply that, especially in my own home. And so the art of pausing, not as drastic as the guy did, but the art of pausing can be just as simple, taking a breath to get back in the conversation. And I'm sure you've all had experiences where you've been talking and then you realise you've been listening to somebody and you realise that, shoot, I can't remember, what were they saying? And it's those moments that you need to get back into the conversation. We will always lose some of the conversation as we get distracted, and many things distract us. And so if you can learn the art of pausing, I promise you that your listening abilities will increase tenfold. So that's my first tip for you tonight. So the second tip is that there are 6 steps to active listening, and I want to talk about step 2. And step 2 is about understanding your role in a conversation. Okay, so being a listening ear is not just about being silent, it's about being present. So, for example, giving a sound or a gesture or acknowledgement can demonstrate that engagement. But it's really important to understand your role in a conversation, especially if you are in a leadership position, because sometimes you just need to listen. Sometimes you need to listen to then direct. Sometimes you need to listen to then support. And sometimes you need to listen to encourage. But to understand your role is really, really important to get all of the value out of who you're listening to and the conversations that you're having. So you think about in a meeting, a leader has to have everybody's point of view, and they need to understand in that meeting, like my example I gave earlier on, whether it's time to lead or is it time to direct. So I'll give you an example. If I'm a young person or just a new person and I don't really know what I'm doing and I'm learning, you will probably use quite directive management for a while. You will say, you go do this, and this is how you do it, and then come back to me, and you go do this and this, and then you come back to me. And that's great because I don't know what I'm doing, so I need somebody to tell me that for a while until I learn. But it's about when they come back and report and listen, doesn't mean that you go, okay, yep, carry on. It's about that time is to direct the next thing and the next thing and the next thing until you're changing from directive type leadership to a more supportive type leadership. Because 3 months down the track, they know how to do that. I'll give you an example in a help desk call centre. The first thing that the new people learn is how to reset the password for people, their passwords. Because on a Monday morning, they get hundreds of those calls. And so when you're first on the call, you get used to the phone, you get used to using the phone, you get used to talking to customers, and you get calls directed to you that are, I can't remember my password. And so they learn that all the time. They just learn that very, very succinctly. But after that, we need to expand. And so the leadership that you provide changes and evolves when the person is acting in their role, whatever that role is. But understanding your role is really important. So understand your role in a conversation, group or meeting. By understanding your role, you will increase your ability to listen. You'll be surprised how much you increase your ability to listen. And ask yourself, what is my role in this conversation? What part do I play in the conversation? Because sometimes it is just the listening ear. So my third one for you is probably one I feel the most passionate about at times, is the word act in the world of listening. So not acting on what you've heard is worse than if you didn't listen to somebody in the first place. So when I do deep dive interviews in organisations, I say to the leadership team, I will not do these deep dive interviews if you are not prepared to go back to your people and tell them that you have heard what they have said. So not acting, it's worse than if you didn't listen to somebody in the first place. Acting on agreed steps is an important part of building trust. So following through is that part of listening that often means the most. You might find that there are no actions required, which often happens, but then again, there may be several. Either way, following up on agreed next steps is a measure of your integrity.
Mm-hmm.
The people you have listened to throughout your week might not remember what you actually said, but they will remember how they felt when you followed up on agreed actions as a result of taking the time to listen to them. Yeah, I can see that you can relate to that. So that is my third step. I cannot stress how important this one is, because trust is so critical when you are a leader and you are wanting your people to talk to you. And if you want your people to talk to you, you have to be able to listen. And so increasing your ability to listen becomes a powerful tool in your toolbox for leadership.
Mm.
And we are never going to be perfect, but we can improve. And we can climb that ladder of being able to listen better. So those are my tips for you tonight. I hope that they help you, and that you, when you practice them and put them into play, that you see the positive results that I know that you can achieve. My last slide is the Winston Churchill slide, because I think when I look at this slide, it does take courage at times to listen fully to all sorts of different people that come in our pathway. So courage is what it takes to stand up and speak, but courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And listening takes time, and we have to prioritise our time to do that, whether it be our workmates or our family or our children or all in our lives. It takes time, but it also takes courage to actually make that a priority and be who you want to be through the power of listening. So I've left some time. I said to Pastor, I wanted to have some time for you to be able to ask me questions. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Yep, back here I am. And happy to take any questions, any inquiries, anything.
My question is, with your pausing, is that similar to code switching? Is that a similar principle? So like taking a moment, I've finished doing that and I'm moving into something else. Is that kind of along those lines?
I suppose you could say it's along those lines, but remembering that in a conversation, and I know myself, it's a big challenge at times, and I'm in a conversation, I'm listening to somebody and my mind goes and does a million other things. I know that I have to refocus, so I'm not finished with the person. It's not a switch, but it is a refocus on what somebody is saying to me. And I find that the more I have mastered that, I don't lose as much as the conversations that I used to lose. And it's something that we all do. It's just, and we've got this busy world around us, and we often, like Stephen Covey said, we're often so busy wanting to say our next thing that we stop listening. All we want them to is to shut up so that we can say what we want to say. And so our mind is going, and we're wanting to say something. And so if you could just shut up, I can say something. And that's what I'm saying is, if we can pause and stop that thought process and let them finish, and then we say it, you are a master of listening just then. But we all have that time when we just want to say our piece, and that's when interruptions come. We interrupt people. We don't let them finish talking because we want to say something, and we're worried that we're going to forget what we want to say. And as we get older, I think that's a real challenge for me, especially. But we forget what we want to say. But you got to ask yourself, well, was it that important to say it? And so
that's good.
Yeah, so that's my thoughts around that. And I've just had so many people come back and tell me how just learning the art of pausing has really helped them in their teams and leadership and just in their family lives, just by learning to do that. Even if it's a couple of seconds, it's worth it.
Well, just a question regarding the listening. How do you deal with someone that has a hearing disability?
Yes.
Like myself?
Yes, yes. Yes, I think that I think there's just a few techniques when you have a hearing disability that you need to just make as part of your everyday life. And I'm sure you probably do it. But it's probably more emphasis on the things to repeat to make sure you understand. And so those little things that you do, that you can make sure that you've heard what they're saying, because you've got the added thing. I found that with people with hearing disabilities are often very good at picking up all the environment around them. They're actually very good listeners because they have to, because of their hearing disability. But if there's techniques that are just work for you, like repeating, checking in during the conversation that you're still on track and know what they're saying or talking about, are all little things that will just be unique to you, but will actually make you feel, right, I've got that. I did hear right. But you'll be surprised, I'm sure, that you have fine-tuned being able to pick up tone of voice. Your other senses are probably fine-tuned to other people more than you think because of your hearing disability. So just pick on a few things that work personally for you, and then that will make you feel better about what you are hearing. And you won't always remember, our biggest enemy is doubt and fear. And so if we start to doubt what we've heard, that will stop you from listening whether you've got full hearing or not. And so just reassure yourself and them that you are hearing what they're saying to you.
What if the conversation, and I'm sorry to be ignorant here, what if the conversation has lost the person?
Oh, like someone's talking to you and you're like,
yes, flowing over your head. You get that?
You do get that sometimes. I'm laughing because you do get that sometimes. And you think, what the heck are you talking about? But you know what? It really applies to the situation and who the person is. But you're better to get them to just clarify things right at the beginning of the conversation. As soon as you get lost, because there's difference between, I'll stop listening because I'm thinking about getting the groceries on the way home and picking up the dry cleaning. That's one thing. But actually not understanding it, the heck what they're saying, that's totally different. and you're better to stop it right then and there and say, look, sorry, I've lost at some point. You need to clarify what you're saying. Now, the key is, though, is when they explain it again, that you clarify back, because that will tell them that you are listening. They can trust you, that you're in the conversation with them. And so clarifying back when they're like that is really important. I've had ones where I'm like, no, we're going to have to pause again, because you've lost me again. Sometimes there's stress. Sometimes I don't have a clue on the subject and I have to question more. But in those circumstances, you're best to keep pausing on it and actually talking to them and saying, "Lo, you'll need to clarify that again." There might be a slower conversation, but at the end of it, I know I've had people say to me, "Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for bearing with me." And taking the time to really help understand what I'm trying to say. Because, not all people are good communicators. And some people say very few words and want us to understand the world. And so, and a lot of times that can be our partners and husbands and wives, And so it's really important when we don't have a clue what they're saying, that we actually have that conversation with them. It's all about that trust aspect of a conversation and how you listen. It's really important to keep the trust. I mean, you might walk away and go, "Crumbs, that was a hard one," but hopefully you don't have too many of them.
Thanks, Lee.
It's a good question. I really like that question.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question, actually, just while we're on this topic. And thank you again, Lee, so much. I've gotten a lot of insights, and just like everyone else, it was like looking in the mirror, and I could immediately see things I could improve on. But my question is, how can a leader influence or create a culture of listening? You've given us all these great tips about how to, be more self-aware, and how to develop your own listening skills. But how do you help other people as a leader develop theirs? Like, where do you start?
Oh, that's a really good question, but it has the simplest of answers, and but it's a really good question. My experience is, when you become the good listener, others will follow you. I've had many reports on a leader, and I'll go back to the engineering manager. He said when he started to really listen to his people, they started to listen to each other and to him. And he saw a change within a month. And he said it was that big, that was the significant influence he had. Like, you're not going to go to your meeting and go, "We're all going to listen to each other better," because that isn't probably going to work. But I'm telling you, it is really leadership by example, where you think about it, you're a leader, you might have 10 people reporting to you, you might have 15 people, you might have 3 or 4. But if you sit and take the time, when you listen to them each time, they know they can trust you, they know that they have a voice, they know that they are heard. And that very personal respect that you show them, they will then do that to others, because their leader shows that type of respect. And I've seen it a lot. I see it when I do change management. I go into an organisation and then I'm the person that's usually giving bad news, or making them do something they don't want to do. And so having people understand that even through change, even when you're wanting them to do things differently, that they have a voice and are heard is just critical. And so I spend a lot of time just listening to people. Now, I might not be able to do what they want me to do, which is either go back to the past or don't make us do things this way. But honestly, through really stressful times, I have found that they say, "But at least we had a voice and we were listened to." and you will see them show that respect to each other. Honestly, Percy, that is the quickest way to gain trust and respect within a team, is the ability to listen to them and always listening to them.
Yeah, I love your slogan for 5 Hour, because it's success begins with listening.
Yeah.
You know, and basically whatever success is, or how you define success, what you're claiming is that it begins with listening.
It
So
does.
if you improve your listening skills, you improve everything else.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Well, I'm pretty sure if we get more questions, how can we get in touch with you, Lee?
You can email me directly on lee@successbeginswithlistening.com, and I'm quite happy to have an email, have a chat to this team. Absolutely happy to do that anytime. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Lee. We are better for it, and we wish you all the best on the 5 levels of listening and 5 Hour and all that you do. And yeah, thank you for your time.
thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lee.
All right.